The world media have exploded with sensational news. The US F-16 fighter jets promised a year ago have finally been delivered to Ukraine. According to the Times, we're talking about the first 6 F-16s delivered to Ukraine from the Netherlands. The Times sources said several more fighter jets are due to arrive soon from Denmark. The New York Times wrote that by the end of 2024, the AFU Air Force would be able to use about 10 F-16 aircraft in combat missions. Shortly after this event, the Wall Street Journal wrote that the U.S. agreed to equip the F-16 fighters sent to Ukraine with AIM-120C 8 AMRAAM and AIM-9X air-to-air missiles, as well as AGM-88 HARM air-to-ground anti-radar missiles and other advanced weapons. In this video, we'll not talk about this vehicle in detail, as there are hundreds of YouTube videos about it, but we'll try to understand what impact these American planes will have on the Russian-Ukrainian war and the entire international situation in general. We're sure that you'll find our conclusions interesting and convincing, and maybe even frightening. Recently, in connection with the Russian army's successes in the war against Ukraine, the view that the appearance of 4th-generation F-16 fighters in this theater of operations will not cause any drastic changes has become almost universally accepted. The arguments of the supporters of these assertions are as follows. The F-16 is undoubtedly an outstanding airplane, one might even say a legend. Due to its versatility and relatively low cost, it's the most mass-produced fighter of the 4th generation. As of June 2018, over 4,604 of these aircraft have been built. It's a success in the international arms market and is in service with 25 countries, and was the most widely used combat aircraft in the world as of 2019. But this aircraft was developed in the early 1970s, and its technical characteristics are markedly inferior to the Russian Su-35 aircraft, which belongs to the Generation 4++, not to mention the latest 5th-generation Su-57 fighters. The F-16 has no stealth technology, so it's perfectly visible on the radars of both the above-mentioned aircraft and on the radars of Russian anti-aircraft systems S-300, S-400, and Buk-M1. The range of the AIM-120C 8 AMRAAM missile is about 100 kilometers or 60 miles. The range of the R-37M missile, which the Russians began to actively use in the last 6 months, is more than 300 kilometers or 200 miles. That is, the Russian Sukhoi will shoot the F-16s while remaining out of reach for return fire. The second argument is that there will be very few F-16s in Ukrainian skies. We're literally talking about a few dozen. Agree, for a war where only total losses on both sides are already more than 500 airplanes, this is a drop in the ocean. In addition, these F-16s will be destroyed not only in the air, but also on Ukrainian airfields, since we emphasize all Ukrainian airfields are within the range of Russian weapons. But despite this, NATO still started to transfer these airplanes to Ukraine. After all, everyone perfectly understands that the burning wreckage of F-16s is great PR for Russia and a powerful anti-piracy for Western weapons. So once again, we ask the question, why do we need F-16s in the skies of Ukraine? To answer this, let's first look at the official purposes for which the U.S. authorized the delivery of its planes to Ukraine. Ukraine is currently experiencing a severe shortage of air defense equipment. In fact, more or less about protection from threats from the air, we can talk about the capital of the country, Kyiv. And even so, the latest missile attack on the city, when 5 or 6 missiles hit targets at the Arsenal military plant and also hit the Akhmedit Children's Hospital, suggests that even Kyiv has no reliable defense against a massive strike. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian army has to waste very scarce missiles on Russian Caliber and Kh-101 subsonic cruise missiles, or even Iranian Shaheds, UAVs with speeds of 200 to 250 kilometers an hour or 125 to 155 miles per hour, flying at altitudes of 200 to 300 meters or 800 to 1,000 feet. For F-16s, these aircraft are easy prey, so U.S. aircraft can unload Ukrainian air defenses, leaving them with more difficult targets, Iskanders and Kinzhals. But again, a few dozen F-16s cannot protect all of Ukraine. But there's another airborne weapon, thanks to which the Russian army has now markedly accelerated the pace of its offensive, and therefore it's the one that Zelensky and the Ukrainian General Staff are most worried about. These are corrective aerial bombs. They're dropped from Su-34 and Su-24M fighter bombers, spread their wings, and fly at a range of 40 to 70 kilometers or 25 to 40 miles, according to a GPS signal. This range allows Russian aircraft to attack targets without entering the kill zone of most Ukrainian surface-to-air missile systems. For example, the S-300 has a range of up to 75 kilometers or 435 miles, and the Buck M1 has a range of up to 35 kilometers or 20 miles. If we talk about NATO systems that were delivered to Ukraine, the range of Iris-T SLM is up to 40 kilometers or 25 miles, and Patriot 70 to 100 kilometers or 40 to 60 miles. At the same time, it's impossible to place these complexes directly near the line of contact, as they'll immediately fall prey to both Iskanders and Lancet attack drones, which are already flying into Ukrainian territory up to 100 kilometers away. The Russians are now dropping up to 50 such bombs a day, and there are hundreds of thousands of them in Putin's arsenals, accumulated since Soviet times. Weighing from 250 kilograms to 3 tons, or 550 to 6,600 pounds, now even a well-fortified concrete stronghold, not to mention ordinary houses, is destroyed without any casualties on the Russian side. And so far, the Ukrainian army has nothing to counter this weapon. The F-16 could attack the Su-34 and Su-24M by flying directly to the front line or even flying over it, but this is a deadly risk. The aircraft finds itself in the kill zone of both Russian fighters and Russian S-400 systems with a range of up to 400 kilometers or 250 miles. Again, there are very few F-16s to cover the entire front line. It's not for nothing that Zelensky is asking for at least 100 of these airplanes, but even if they were given, Ukraine doesn't have that many pilots capable of flying such machines. There's another big problem for F-16s in Ukraine. As we said earlier, all Ukrainian airfields are within range of Russian weapons. But while airfields in the eastern and central parts of the country are within range of not only cruise missiles, Shaheds, but also Iskanders, supersonic Iskanders, which are much harder to shoot down, do not reach airfields in western Ukraine. But for example, the Starokostian Tynev airfield is about 900 kilometers or 560 miles from the front. That's less than the combat radius of the F-16, which is 1,360 kilometers or 845 miles. But it would take about half an hour to fly from this airfield to the line of contact, and Russian planes are about twice as close. So they'll drop their bombs and fly away unhindered. So once again, we ask the question, why does Ukraine need F-16s? What's the point of them? There's a point, and it's very important. It's no secret that neither side will achieve absolute victory, neither Ukraine nor Russia. The countries will have to compromise. Most likely, this will happen after the presidential elections in the United States. But what will it consist of? It depends on the situation on the front line at the time of negotiations. Will the Russians continue their offensive that Ukraine will have to make big concessions, loses a lot of territories, and undertakes to observe the neutral status? But if the situation changes and Ukraine conducts a successful counteroffensive, it can demand more acceptable conditions for itself. For example, it'll retain the right to join NATO and give up only the territories along the front line. Or perhaps it'll cede the entire Donbas in exchange for the Russians' withdrawal from the Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions. Experts say that the most likely strike could be in the Kharkiv region, with an attempt to attack the already native Russian city of Belgorod. The second in the Zaporizhzhia region to liberate the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, the largest in Europe, and in this offensive it's difficult to overestimate the role of F-16s. These aircraft can cover the Ukrainian fall counteroffensive and prevent the enemy from using aviation, primarily helicopters, which played a major role in suppressing Ukrainian columns of military equipment last year. Also, let's not forget that the F-16 is a carrier of AGM-158 JASSM cruise missiles as well. This is an analog of the Anglo-French Storm Shadow Scalp EG missile, which is already used by Ukraine. There's information that the F-16 can be a carrier of this Anglo-French weapon as well. Therefore, in parallel with the fall counteroffensive, the Ukrainian army can use F-16s to intensively fire these missiles at Crimea, which is a sacred place for Russia. And in case of a successful counteroffensive, plus painful strikes on Crimea, Putin may agree to terms acceptable to Ukraine. There's another option to explain the logic behind the F-16 deliveries to Ukraine. The last decade can be described as a retreat of the West to the global South. The U.S. was forced to withdraw its troops from Afghanistan, and dictators oriented towards Russia and China remained in power in Syria and Venezuela despite huge efforts. The anti-Western organization BRICS, whose economic potential is already equal to that of the West, is growing stronger. The defeat of Ukraine will be the defeat of NATO, the defeat of the West, and this major fiasco can make the process of the West's retreat irreversible. Therefore, it's impossible to lose. This is the Rubicon. To avoid losing, the U.S. and its allies need to dramatically increase their involvement in this conflict, raise the stakes, escalate the escalation, and this can be done with the help of the F-16. We've already talked about the inconvenience of Ukrainian airfields for F-16 deployment, but they can be used as hopping airfields. That is, the planes will be based in another country, and Ukraine sites will house weapons for reloading and fuel for refueling. These planes will spend a minimum time on them, and the main time will be spent on foreign airfields. Putin's already said that in such a case, Russia will hit these airfields, and one cannot doubt that Putin has enough determination. In this regard, there's information that they want to use Moldova as the main base for F-16s. This will allow NATO countries not to become targets for Russian missiles, which would put the world on the brink of nuclear war. But at the same time, provoke the Kremlin to a harsh reaction. This will increase escalation, allowing NATO countries to be more generous in giving Ukraine weapons, but without having to directly intervene in the war themselves. In short, the F-16 Fighting Falcon could turn out to be both the key that opens the door to peace talks favorable to Ukraine and the West as a whole, and the fuse that explodes the conflict and brings it to an even higher degree. So, a dove of peace, or a hawk of war. And what do you think the appearance of the Fighting Falcon in the skies of Ukraine will lead to? Will it help to turn the situation around and end the war with a result acceptable to the West? Or will it, on the contrary, only intensify the conflict? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd be glad to get a thumbs up and subscription to our channel. Thank you for watching, and see you soon.